Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the second session of our inaugural Sports Innovation Summit. Kind of learning how sports, entrepreneurship, and innovation all can tie together. My name is Matt Smiler. I'm the director of the Arnold Center for Entrepreneurship. I get the honor to kind of help announce this session. A couple of years ago, a major transformation happened across universities. Finally, student athletes were allowed to monetize their name, image, and likeness. And when that happened, instantly every athlete on campus became an entrepreneur. And every support system around them had to be innovative and be entrepreneurial to think of ways to serve those new entrepreneurs. Whether that was through collective sponsorship deals, through speaking engagements, through sporting events, whatever that may be, how can we help those athletes with their brands? But along with the athletes, there's the entire industry around sports and athletes that has also seen an increase in entrepreneurship and innovation. We have a fantastic panel today that's going to help discuss what they're seeing across the entrepreneurial landscape at different universities as well as in the community. If this is something that's interesting to you, we are kicking off our sports and entrepreneurship certificate this fall, so it can be enhance your degree if something that you're interested in that couples both sports management and sports business and entrepreneurship and innovation into one kind of easy to swallow certificate program. I'm not going to take up too much time because these panelists are fantastic and we want to hear what they have to say. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jason Reese, who will help moderate this panel. Dr. Reese?
Thank you. Appreciate it. So welcome again. This session is one that we designed specifically because we knew as students, you guys were probably interested in this. And obviously the industry is something that's expanding in this area. It's relatively new and fresh. And so let's learn a little bit about it. Again, as he said, the Sport Innovation Certificate starts in the fall. But one of the classes that is specifically required in that certificate is one about sport entrepreneurship and NIL. And so if this is something that continues to interest you, come talk to me. I'll be actually teaching that class in the fall semester. You may already be enrolled in it. So let us know. But let's jump into it. I want to first let our panelists kind of tell a little bit about who they are. We've got a variety of different backgrounds here and looking forward to learning from them. Throughout this session, kind of to set the tone, I'm going to ask the panelists some questions. I'll probably specifically ask, hey, Wally, answer this question for me, or Antonio, or whatever, and then let them feed off of each other. And then at the end, we're going to have some time set aside so that you all can ask some questions of them. So let's get started. The way it is showing on our screen, I'm going to go top to bottom. And on the top is Wally. Wally, why don't you tell us a little about who you are and your position?
Sure. Thanks, Dr. Reese. Appreciate you guys putting this together. I think it's a great opportunity to share some thoughts and also take in thoughts from others. So excited to be here. Appreciate the invitation. I'm the Senior Associate for External Affairs here at Stephen F. Austin. Oversee our Stratcom, all of our social, and then our external revenue generating side of the house, which is our ticketing, development, licensing, merchandising. So a lot of the co-branding that goes through everything within Stephen F's walls comes through our licensing office, which we can talk about a little bit later. Been here since 2013. Previous to this, I was a head soccer coach and then moved into administration in this capacity in 19. And then I've been involved in brand management and digital management since 2010.
You also coordinate our new NIL shop, which I'm sure we'll hear more about. Sure. In the time coming. So yeah. So Kevin, why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
Absolutely. Well, glad to be here. My background still is sports and media. I focused on the content for a lot of years. I was able to launch the Fox Sports brand in the U.S. We created from a broadcast perspective and then all of our regional networks. And then my more experience around entrepreneurship, I love more the intrapreneurship. So for instance, at Fox Sports, we launched our digital division. If you're familiar with NFL Sunday Ticket, those were a lot of things that we have rights, we have value. And again, you're going to hear the words growth, and more growth. How do we grow the business, no matter what you have? And so we had to create a lot of individual properties such as NFL Sunday Ticket. I did that with NBC Sports. We created some things, the NCAA, and even Major League Baseball. So again, just how do we grow these type properties? And so where I look at kind of this ecosystem is from a company and a brand perspective, and then how does it work all the way down to the front lines in the community? And that's why I'm intrigued with the NIL and kind of how we can make impact from the grassroots level all the way up to the more of these larger enterprises.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So Antonio, you're our third here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
All right. Thank you for having me. My name is Antonio Banos. I'm a professor in the Department for Entrepreneurship and Innovation at TCU. I'm also the Associate Director for the Institute for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. In the department, I teach 3 sections of our NIL class. It's 3 classes with 45 students each, 100% focused on NIL. We started this because, of course, the need for it for our student athletes and our non-student athletes, and the tremendous opportunity in the space. On the institute side, I am in charge of the NIL program. We service all of our student athletes with workshops, one-on-one sessions, consultations, recruitment. We have a space in the stadium where we are there every day of the week, helping them out with their NIL. Before TCU, I'm an entrepreneur. I was very lucky and blessed to have had 2 successful exits. Mainly my role in those companies has always been sales, branding, product development, and such. So yeah, that's me.
Well, thanks so much. Kind of tell you about who's in the room. Right now, we have a variety of different students, mainly in the College of Business, either entrepreneurship or sport business majors. So if you're a sport business major or entrepreneurship major, kind of raise your hand. A little over half the room. How many people are College of Business majors from some other discipline or major? And then probably minors or somebody who's just interested in this field, right? So you've got those types of students in the room wanting to learn more about it. So first question, this is kind of a softball question. Anybody can take it. And again, just feed off of each other in your answers. But if you were to explain name, image, and likeness to the average fan or the consumer on the street, what would you say? How do you define that? How would you describe it? Kevin, I'll let you kick it off.
Yeah, I think, and first I didn't mention, again, I don't do all the stuff and Antonio does. You know, he likes to touch everything at TCU, but I teach sports and entertainment marketing as well. So teach it in the business school and had started the sports business program up at the University of Oregon as well, which was the first in the business school undergrad and MBA back in the 90s. So again, have seen the evolution within that. But, you know, name, image, likeness is the intent of it is how can you obviously present yourself in a way without your school. Oftentimes it's now been blurred a little bit. But again, what's the value? Exchange of value. What is your brand that has value to another party? And what's it like to have a relationship with you? So, you know, I like seeing all the way down is all the way, you know, with student athletes or you as students. Again, you guys are building brands and this is a long-term game. So I love what NIL is doing to allow us to jumpstart it now. But again, how do you bring value to your name, image, and likeness?
Awesome. And any other panelists want to add to that, or did he succinctly define it for us? Sounds good. Molly, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just add from another perspective as well. You know, this conversation goes back quite a ways. You know, previous to here, I was at A&M, Nebraska, and Oklahoma, and you know, Nebraska was one of the thought leaders with regards to cost of attendance. And when Tom Osborne was there, you know, scholarship covered a lot of what was in your institutional economy inside your institutional walls. But a lot of the things like toilet papers, you know, necessities, things that a lot of times our athletes were frankly having to figure out ways to cover those expenses, the true cost of attendance. And so cost of attendance, when it was figured in, was a big deal. But I'll go a step further that from an NIL standpoint, you know, understanding that, you know, there is a brand value that a value add that a student athlete brings to their team and to the institution. And it goes as basic as not being able to do coaching on facilities. It goes as basic as not being able to say, formerly, if I was a starting goalkeeper for my soccer team, I couldn't do a private instruction and say I was a goalkeeper for SFA. So it was things that on one side of the pendulum, you know, we all hear about the 6, 7, 8 figure type movements and all the money that's being invested in the NIL sector. But on the other side of the pendulum is some very basic necessities that I think a lot of people forget are out there and are addressed with NIL. So I would also want to bring that perspective as you guys think about NIL and what it is.
May I add something real quick? So I think, you know, when I talk to my students or clients and such, is I say NIL is nothing new. It is a right to publicity, the ability to monetize from your God-given name, image, and likeness. Of course, the term is now used by the media and by collectives within the sports space. But when we take a step back, a lot of foundation has been set with just the rights to publicity.
Awesome. All right, so I'm gonna let Antonio kick this one off, at least the question, and you guys can add to it. So we got a room full of students and potentially interested in NIL. Why should it matter? Why should they care about understanding this idea of personal branding and NIL if they're studying entrepreneurship, sport business, or just have the interest to advance their careers?
All right, yeah. So there's generational opportunities, right? I mean, as examples, online shopping, crypto. Now we have AI, and I would add NIL within sports. The identity, one of the core identities of the United States is being redefined as we speak, which is sports. In the past, instead of students having to break into sports entertainment either through ticket sales or, you know, being coffee people, now there's an opportunity for these individuals to truly advance their careers, whether they want to be lawyers, agents, accountants, marketers, advertisers, entrepreneurs, because there is a sector of like a portion of the industry that was not able to have disposable income, was not targeted, was not able to do something. If we think about our athletic department, they're not built to sustain what's coming, and they're having to adapt. They're having to either hire internally, externally, and figure out how things are gonna unfold in order to be prepared. And so the ability for our students right now to capitalize on that opportunity is generational. So in my opinion, we will see a lot of careers, you know, be established because of this. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I'll jump in there as well to support that. What I love, what Antonio's doing with our NIL here at TCU, again, whether you're able to then make money or an earning from the NIL and selling of your name, image, likeness now, but he's focused on the long term. Again, it is building brands, whether you're a student athlete or not. It's the same process, but again, he's using this platform as an excuse to do. And again, I love the dynamic of what's happening, because every one of us is entering into a gig economy. And so we've always got to sell ourselves within the marketplace, whether we are freelance, an entrepreneur, or I was an entrepreneur within companies. And so I still had to every day sell myself. What was my brand? Did people trust that I could do the job for them? And so again, what a great kickstart this is. And so this NIL is that is the baseline.
Jason, I'll hop in here as well. Personal opinion here, and we can dive down debates over coffee talk sometime. But you know, I felt that when the NCAA put their stamp on the transfer portal, I thought that was a bad move, because I felt that it would be interpreted as the NCAA supporting transfer. I would also tell you that when the NCAA said that NIL couldn't live in our department walls, I thought that was a bad move. I would have flipped it. And if you look up Mississippi State right now, you'll see they just filed to allow for internal support with NIL within the athletic department walls. And building on what Antonio said, when that movement happens, which it will happen, where we are allowed to administer and support internally within our department walls and pay players for promoting our games based on attendance, you know, pay players to be promotional items that we're giving away at games. When that happens, there's going to be all kinds of needs to manage those demands. And you sitting in that room there, if you're passionate about what you can do in this space, beginning to research and beginning to prepare yourself to really speak the language first, and then understand how to execute at a high level, NIL will move internally. And I think that that's going to be a great day when it does. As a athletic department administrator, I look forward to that moment when that happens.
Well, that kind of jumps to a question I was gonna ask later, but since it's a good segue, I'm gonna jump ahead. So I'm gonna read a quote from Lincoln Riley, USC football, not long ago, in March of 24. He basically stated, being in LA, our guys are probably get more from outside deals than anybody else in the country based on where they're located, which is awesome. But we need to support the support to be right there with that too, and with our donors and our collectives. That has to be some massive, massive jumps here. That has taken some massive, massive jumps here in the last several months. So can you speak to the balance? You're talking about how athletics is going to eventually be inside the walls of the athletic department. Can you speak to the balance that athletic coaches and administrators have to take when you're balancing donor relations, sponsorship agreements, but then also this concept of collectives and NILs? How do you balance all that when you're maintaining relationships with constituents? Now, maybe different at different size institutions, but how do you do that? Wally, since you started down this road, we'll let you answer it first.
Sure. I think the first thing is you got to have multiple revenue streams. I think the notion that we're going to be philanthropic driven with our NIL, the notion that our donors are going to have to pick and choose where they're putting their resources, I think first and foremost, we've got to move away from that. And we are. I mean, for instance, our NIL store and the great things that are happening in retail co-branding across the country right now, especially since, Texas law supports that. And I still think there's change in the Texas law coming that will even open that up further. So first thing I would say is, as administrators, you got to think outside the box and you got to identify multiple revenue streams. Whether it's retail, whether it's licensing, whether it's ticket share, rev share, which I do think is on the horizon as well, and whether there's a philanthropic play there. The other thing I would say is, as an administrator, you need to be able to tell your athletes, keep the main thing the main thing. You need to be able to tell your coaches, keep the main thing the main thing. AJ Kajus went viral over spring break with a miracle at the buzzer, that we had a micro moment captured and retail deployed within 24 hours, and he became our highest NIL earner for the month of March, and he was on the platform for 7 days. But what I would tell you is, AJ wasn't thinking about NIL when he got that pass and put that shot up. He was thinking about one thing, and that's doing everything in his power to help Stephen F. Austin win that game. And so, it's going to be tricky though, because you can't put that on the coaches and athletes without proof that you are trying to support in the shadows and put in programming that will help empower them. So I think that's the balance. And it starts though with thinking outside the box and identifying multiple revenue streams. At one time, non-traditional revenue was licensing and merchandising. There was a time in college athletics where traditional revenue was ticket sales and donations. Licensing and merchandising was considered non-traditional revenue. All right. As we sit here today, non-traditional revenue may actually encompass NIL revenues. That will become traditional budgeted revenue lines in the short term. And so I think that's something I would be aware of as an administrator as well.
Wally, do you see the top line revenues increasing or staying the same through all this process?
And when you say top line revenues, you talking about our self-generated revenues, like taking
athletic departments. So again, just to, I guess I've been talking to a number of institutions, and again, expense line is going up, revenue line is not. So how does that, it seems to be a real challenge, because the true NIL is an exchange of value between outside parties versus the pay to play that we're doing. It's, in my mind, and again, I'm not in the day-to-day as you are. I'm just very curious because I'm just talking to some institutions that are worried about, do they start cutting programs? Because the top line revenues doesn't grow to offset some of this. So where do you see the revenues coming from in those multiple sources? I'm curious.
Well, that's a good thought. I think the first thing I would say, and this would probably be at the disagreements of some of our academic counterparts across campus, is, there's got to be a balance, because every sport is revenue generating sport. They may not be ticketed, but every single sport, for instance, here, we've got something around approximately 550 athletes in our department. Of that, we've got about 197 scholarships that are funded. So we've got the difference in those numbers of kiddos that we've recruited that are pumping in tuition, books, fees, housing, meal plans, They are driving revenue. And so at some point, is there a recognition of revenues earned based on recruiting? But the other thing I'll tell you, and that's more abstract. I mean, you could debate for days on that. But the other thing that's pretty exciting, you know, we all live in an area or an era where performance marketing is a big piece of what we're teaching and what we're driving. And performance marketing is very, very important. But I will tell you, performance marketing plus emotional connection, that's where you see exponential returns. An example being, you know, we did almost $12,000 in month one from our NIL store with a third of our athletes currently on the platform. For me as a licensing director on campus here, if you stretch that out over 12 months, we might end up accounting for as much as 10% of our institutional licensing royalties because of the emotional connection. You know, my kids, we bought 5 pieces of garment, right?
Yep.
My daughters have not asked for a piece of SFA athletic attire or any kind of attire in at least 5 years. But as soon as we dropped the NIL store and there was an emotional connection with Isabella Ortiz, as soon as there was an emotional connection with AJ Kajus, my wife, my daughters, they all want that merchandise. So I'm curious to see where this trends over the next 6 months or so. But I don't think that revenues will hit a ceiling. I think there's going to be some strategic measures put in place to capture emotion, which is the value add that our athletes bring to those revenues.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, so I've got another question. So say you are sitting down with a student athlete and they are curious about how to, or it doesn't have to be a student athlete, right? We're talking about personal branding here. I want to be able to create some value in my name, image, and likeness. Where do I start? Like there's lots of opportunities for media appearances, licensing, autographs, social media. There's a lot of opportunities and things they can do. So Kevin, why don't you get us started on this one? What advice do you give them? Where do they start if you're starting from scratch?
You know what? I'm going to defer to Antonio on this one.
Okay, Antonio, you start off.
No, again, this is every day. He lives it far more than I. I kind of focus on more the global or national brands and how do we get down to the NIL level. Antonio is far more qualified to start this off, and I'll jump in and support. Please.
I got a question for you in a little bit. How about that?
Sure.
Thank you, Kevin. That's how I lost my hair. I had hair before NIL. No, but I mean, even in my classes, Kevin, whenever somebody brings up an extremely good point or like a different perspective, and I go, "Where'd you get that?" They go like, "Oh, I'm in Professor Kevin Butler class." I'm like, that makes sense. All right.
Another view.
So I would say, based on previous experience with brands, with influencers, and the current situation that we're dealing with, countless student athletes stopping by for us to help them out is very simple. It starts with identity discovery. Discovering their identity is imperative, crucial, because every athlete has an expiration date, number one. And they can't only be football players, basketball players, volleyball players, because the brand wants more than that, right? Just like Wally was mentioning, it's not about the SFA or the TCU piece of swag or t-shirt or whatever. It's emotional connection. It's not just the emotional connection, but it goes even further than that. Is what identity does this individual have that is going to have a long-lasting relationship connection, maybe first as a like, then as a follow, and then, a like, a comment, and then a follow, right? So we really focus on that identity discovery so that when that moment of either hype from news media or performance arrives, they have an identity where they can talk to this brand when the brand asks, okay, so you're a football player. What else are you? What else do you do? How else are you going to connect with our audience? How else are you going to drive sales? How are you going to be an ambassador for our brand? And at the same time, in this identity discovery is the entrepreneurship 101, right? In this journey, you're not going to wait until you're perfect. You're going to be putting yourself out there and testing out what we call the feedback loop, your audience. You're testing out different, purposes and tones and approaches, so that when the moment comes, you're ready. When the moment comes, your social media is ready. So I would say the first step is, it's we could teach an entire half semester by, identity discovery, but I believe that is imperative because we see it with entrepreneurs not in the NIL space when they come and they say, hey, Antonio, I need some help with X, Y, and Z. And I take it back and I say, wait, let's go into like self-leadership, emotional intelligence, habits, because the issue started way before you had your customer acquisition issue. It started with a founder that was not in the right place at the right time and with the right set and with the right culture in order to be able to lead. Because at the end of the day, these influencers and the sports and the student athletes are going to be leaders. And if they can't lead themselves, they can't lead others.
Yeah, so that kind of jumps into another subject I want to bring up. So how, you mentioned it just now, but they've set this themselves up so when that moment comes, they're ready. So there's an example, we're in the middle of it right now, March Madness, right? If you students watched the first round, Jack Oakey, Oakland, hit 10 3-pointers in a row, beat and upset number 3 Kentucky, right? Before that moment, he had 500 followers, and within 2 days, he had 71,000 followers, signed 2 different deals, one with Ophis and the other was TurboTax, I believe, all in a 2-day period, which then played the second round they lost. But point is, how is he ready to do that? How was he able to capitalize on that in a situation like that? Obviously, that's a very large stage, but there's gonna be lots of examples where an athlete or influencer can do that. So whomever wants to take this one, how are you prepared to do that as an athlete or influencer to take advantage of that moment?
I'll take it from the Dr. Reese, I'll take it from more of the, those companies, TurboTax, they've got to be prepared as well.
Yep.
Probably Wally could jump on how the player jumps in that way. It's got to be intentional. Again, it is something there you've allocated because we are talking, this is very transactional. And the larger the organization, the harder it is to make those kind of choices and pivots. It's either got to be something. Good example last week, I was with a financial institution that is looking at expanding its footprint within college athletics. It made a very conscious decision not to do any NIL deals because of the transactional nature. So that Jack Gilkey from Oakland, what a great story that is. Is it sustainable? Does that build the relationship that they need next year, next month, just further than just look at what we did now, which is fantastic. But is it sustainable, especially for an industry that's about trying to build trust? And they just felt it was very transactional. So again, it's just companies are being very strategic about it, but some that are some are off brand that are not maybe the leaders, but I like some that have said intentional, we're going to be opportunistic. So when the next Jack happens, we've got allocated budgets and our teams in place to be able to execute on that and kind of plug and play with that. But it's got to be a very intentional choice. They probably did the budgeting back in the fall to say, all right, what's happening in 2024? We can't anticipate this, but that's where those companies come from and can make choices and act quickly on it. Otherwise, it's nice. There's some cute, things that can happen quickly, but overall, real money that's going to change hands takes a little bit of a time and planning either on the company side and more importantly from the student athlete side. How can we build that infrastructure in place?
Oh, good.
I would add to that too that there's nothing wrong with talking about the transactional nature. Specifically, just to give you some metrics, we had one of our moments go viral, right? And the cost per click, if we had done paid search with that or paid boost, would have been 1/10 of 1 penny. So 1/10 of 1 penny is what, if we had a partner who was collaborating in that moment, that would have been their cost per click. And so now that's not every moment. Typically we live just in a day-to-day, we live around 30 cents, 35 cents, but when you have that lightning in a bottle and you're prepared, it's good. And maybe in that case to have transactional data to show value add, that it's okay if you think of our athlete as a transaction. We're cool with that because it's going to be 1/10 of 1 penny on your budget that what other campaign can you run to get that emotional connection for that cost? The other thing I'll tell you is from a revenue standpoint, and Kevin, we talked a little bit about this with additional revenues. So with the ability to co-brand, it's now in Stephen F's interest to help prepare and build these NIL engagements, these micro moments. For another example would be our volleyball team. The title T-shirt we did for our volleyball team. Our volleyball team won the league back in November, but we purposely held on doing a title T-shirt because we were in the weeds with our NIL store since August to roll this out. And that was the first drop we did. And so now we have a moment where instead of doing a title T-shirt with a bookstore, we can do it with our NIL store, and our kiddos get a share of every title T-shirt sold in their locker, which is fantastic. But Stephen F's getting 12% off every shirt as well. So again, all tides raise everyone, right? We're better together than we are independent. And that's another reason I think this will come in-house.
So kind of piggyback off what Kevin was talking about, being prepared from a business perspective. Let's get you the opposite of what happened with Kentucky and Oakland. So Kentucky goes out in the first round, number 3, fully expected to be in the Sweet 16 at least. Robert Dillingham was able to get several different deals related to his name, image, and likeness. Several things were planned out, and boom, he's out of the tournament. What do you do if you're on the company side to prepare for, the phrase, the best laid plans of mice and men often go astray, this idea that sometimes we have plans in place and we got to pivot. So how are you preparing, if you're on the firm side, to work with these very, be risk adverse, but risky situations? So Antonio or Kevin, y'all want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll throw something at, again, just continue on. Again, I think it's that preparation. Jason, as far as just, making sure that in place, it is a transactional environment. So you're building a system that works effectively within that. So the Robert Dillingham, that's the best laid plans, and it's awesome. And if it works, it goes. And if not, you've got plans B, C, D, E, and F all ready to go. Are there other players that you can plug in to get the same kind of multiple and same kind of numbers that you need to deliver on the promise with a specific audience? So I'm just going to say this, having been in the sporting goods business a lot of years as well with a Nike and a Converse, you spend a lot of time investment spending. You may go sign 20, 25 athletes. All you need is one to hit, and it pays for everybody. So again, it's there, but it just understanding just the different layers and levels, of what's there, but you just hope, how can you get one to work through that? But you're anticipating a very transactional environment. Another Kentucky athlete that I spent some time with probably a month ago, when he was on the payroll at Kentucky, let's just say it was 7 figures. He's now playing in the G League and he's making $76,000. Again, he perceived that he was so much more valuable and the school was just paying to play. But what's a value for him as a personal brand? What he brings, does he help companies sell product? He's got no endorsement deals and he's making $76,000 with the G League. The young man's struggling because he's kind of used to being on a pretty good payday. So it can go a lot of different directions. Companies are wise because, again, you've got to build structure and infrastructure within that. At least that's my perspective and what I've probably spent a lot of time over the last several months. How do we create these environments, these ecosystems that can be effective with the young man that from Stephen F. Austin hits the shot, or the Oakland, let's hit it, let's run, and or Kentucky situation where they don't meet expectations and we're okay because we're hedging our bets.
I absolutely love what Kevin just said, and specifically investment spending, Kevin. That's perfect. I'm gonna take it from you.
Run, go.
That was so good because it is so true. And so I'm gonna take it from like a similar approach and perspective, but with a little twist, is the brands have to have the right expectation for to be successful. Because some numbers, the average student athlete, on average, a student athlete only has 2 to 2.5 hours of free time a day. And when we talk about free time a day, it is more around an hour and a half to 2 hours truly. And that free time is to hang out with friends, to watch Netflix, to be teenagers if they are 17, 18, 19, or to be extremely young adults, right? So that free time is very minimal. However, the average NIL activity takes 3.5 hours to complete. So whenever we're talking about that, is the brand has to have the right expectations and the right system in place in order for the student athlete to be successful. They can't expect to give a student athlete the same agreements, the same processes, and the same expectations as they give to an influencer, because the influencer doesn't report to anybody for the most part. The student athlete reports to coaches, teammates, schools, professors, and such, right? So setting the right expectations, setting the right process for a brand to be successful is imperative in this scenario for them to have success.
Antonio, are you seeing more companies coming forth with resources and tools to help that? Or we as the university, are you seeing we're still kind of bearing most of the responsibility to help kind of this 3.5 hours to create an activity? Again, that's not realistic. So again, I'm curious, what do you see?
Yeah, so I've had the blessings to be able to consult with a few of our local, large companies that we have in DFW, and things that I hear are they are ready to jump in to the NIL space, ready financially to allocate resources at the macro, micro, and nano level, right, at the local level.
Yep.
But they are frustrated that our student athletes don't know how to best represent their brand. Because for the most part, whenever they go to an influencer, they will have, I don't know, 50,000 followers. From there, they've already had some trial and errors with brands, right? And so these influencers have learned via feedback of smaller brands what worked, what didn't work, and such. For these student athletes, whether it's a small company or a larger company, the last thing they want is for their product to be showcased in a mirror with a toilet behind them real quick. Or, I'm not going to put any names out there, but if there is a football player promoting cookies, Kevin, you might know who I'm talking about. And this is a big, strong guy. I mean, his thighs are the size of just me. And the bag of cookies is so small they can't even fit their hand. And they are in the, in the football room, the bag of cookies is like not even seen. And so they're putting a lot of this on the schools.
Yeah.
But of course, the schools don't have the resources. Here at TCU, we're very blessed that we have the relationship between the NIL School of Business and Athletics. But at the same time, all of these, 500 plus entrepreneurs that we inherited overnight, it's a learning process. And there are teenagers, a lot of them. So I am seeing a lot of brands putting that on the schools, on the athletic departments, and being very frustrated because there's that educational, barrier of entry per se, that whenever they're running something by their risk departments or by the higher level brand decision people, there's that hesitation, right? So I would say, to go back to one of the first questions in terms of balance, I think education plays a tremendous key role in balancing, educating donors, educating student athletes, educating coaches, educating administrators, educating brands, and of course also educating parents, because as most of you all know, there's already 35 states that allow NIL at the high school level, soon to be 37. So everything we're seeing right now is going to the high school level. And if you want to talk about, I was going to say poop hitting the ceiling or whatever, but with other words, it's about to happen, right? So education.
Awesome. So we could probably talk for hours about NIL. I mean, I know we could. I have like 10 other questions I would love to ask, but I want to make sure they have time to ask questions. So I want to ask one more. So let's say you've got somebody sitting in the room here. Either they're an athlete, they're an influencer, or there's somebody who wants to work with those individuals, what advice do you have for them today? In other words, how can they communicate their value? And what is their takeaway? What should they walk away from today? What encouragement do you have for them or advice? And we'll let everybody answer this question. Well, I'm gonna let you start.
Yeah, I mean, we got no problems. That's the first thing I would say, is we got no problems that we can't solve together. So don't be intimidated by what you read and the scale at what you read. Talk to people, get feedback, and then take a value add mentality to every relationship and every conversation that you had. You know, let's make sure that when you sit down across the table from someone, that you represent your thoughts, but at the end of that conversation, both parties are better because we had that conversation. And I think if we take that open-minded, positive outlook, you know, let's talk about tomorrow's truth, right? You know, our academics in the room will agree that there's no such thing as an absolute truth. There is only what is true today. And so what I like to do is I like to live in what is true today that will impact tomorrow's truth. And I think that that's a mentality that I think you got to have if you're going to work in an emerging space, if you're going to work in this type of you know, environment where you got to move fast and you got to trust your skill set, you got to trust conversations. It's a lot of hypotheticals. It's a lot of preparing for something that may not happen. And you got to be comfortable in that role and having those type conversations. And the last thing I would say before I hand it over is, for those of you here on campus, give me a call. If this is something, if licensing, merchandising, NIL, if this is an area that you're interested in, I am in it day to day, and I would love to share that space with anyone who is passionate about elevating it.
Go ahead, Antonio.
Yeah, I'd say start. Don't plan. I mean, just start. Dive in. We have several non-student athletes, what we call NARPs, non-athletic regular people, who are just starting, and they're contacting student athletes, and they are like Wally said, you know, having their value, the unique value proposition. What do they bring to the table? And making connections and building relationships with our student athletes and pitching themselves, right? Hey, I can do your social media. Hey, I can write you a marketing plan. Hey, I can connect you with brands. What do you need? What are your pain points? Because what they're doing is they're building their portfolio. They're building skills. I have a non-student athlete who was talking to me asking, hey, should I take this sales internship, or should I just dive into this and starting to help out some student athletes, because these are all the opportunities I have, all the connections I have, and what I will do. I told them, well, you're going to lose money in this internship. May seem good on paper, but all of this experience that you will have and the money that you will be able to generate and what you will be able to talk in your actual job interview will be so much more valuable than, you know, a low-level internship where I don't know how much you're really gonna have a way to differentiate yourself from everybody else who had an internship as such. So yeah, fail fast.
Start, fail fast. Make sure you understand that value proposition. Please, please. Again, if you can't articulate it, no one's there to do it for you. And I want to focus on the NARPs in the room. So again, what was that again? Non-athlete?
Non-athletic regular people.
I like those regular people. Again, that's who I'm going to focus at, kind of the sports business. Yes, the athletes, but you know, I love the business world. I want to see, if you want to be in this profession, you got to move beyond teams. You got to find something you're good at and that's of value in the marketplace. Is it AI? Is it analytics? You know, is it streaming? Is it content? Is it global? How about betting? You know, what are the growth areas that the sports industry is looking to do? And if you can go be an expert at that, you can apply it to sport any step of the road. So again, get out there, understand your value proposition, but hey, I'm good at numbers. Let me go understand analytics. I get calls weekly from brands, teams, agencies looking for individuals, analytics, for example. that are looking for can come in and make everyone's life a little bit easier and better. So go be great at it. You know, the MIT has a sports analytics conference every year. Phenomenal. Even if you're not in it, go to it. You'll see some of the smartest and best people in the world, how they're breaking down for teams, how they're breaking for brands, fan engagement, the entire ecosystem of sports. You need to understand that, but you got to have that skill set, be value add and understand what you're good at. I got lucky with Fox Sports because, again, that was a media brand. I followed the money. Where's the money most of in television dollars of the dollar? But that was our first digital property, which was streaming. And it was NFL Sunday Ticket, MLB Extra Innings, NBA League Pass. And that was a ship I got to ride for a lot of years. I got lucky. You just put yourself in position. And I was prepared and got lucky. So again, that's my guidance for those NARPs in the room. There's a lot of you guys, and that's us. So again, it's a great business, but you need to understand it is a business. Focus on the business. It'll apply to sports.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the advice. I'm gonna open the floor up for about 5 minutes from people in the audience. So I'm gonna keep talking until somebody raises their hand. Okay.
So,
You should be able to hear them through the microphone. So let us know if you can't hear them, okay?
sweet. So I know it might be out there, but I feel like now that NIL is like becoming a thing, that like you guys just mentioned, it's a business. So would you start treating your student athletes as employees? Because when I kind of look at it, I'm from Houston, and I look at billboards and I see the University of Houston basketball team on there. So I just did some research right now. They get paid, or the basketball team collectively equally divided $1 million per player just to be on the cover of billboards for this law firm, and as well as Mattress Mac, they're a part of that as well. So I'm just thinking, do you think in the next 10, 15 to 20 years, we will start seeing student athletes be classified as employees? And what are your thoughts?
Wally, jump in since you're the administrator first, and then we'll follow your lead.
Yeah, and I think there's two questions there. The first one is, how do we think of them? I don't think of them in that way. I think of them as my son and as my daughter, and opportunities that are presented that will help better their lives. I want to do everything I possibly can to help our athletes enjoy every opportunity that they have earned. And again, you know, you talk about that emotional connection. When I say earned, I mean, they've made decisions to be elite athletes since middle school. Other people are going to school dances and they're on the field. Other people are taking summer vacations and they're at summer camps. And we all make decisions, and we all have skill sets that we've invested in and built out. And theirs happens to be something that they can monetize in this environment, in this setting. And I'm going to help them do that. So I would say that's how I think of them. Now, what's on the landscape, what's on the horizon for employees? I'll just tell you, I have no idea. And I would tell you, there's nothing that we can't overcome. So I will tell you, if the NCAA allows for teams to break off and take that approach, we'll solve it. There is nothing that we can't solve. And so am I stressed about it? Absolutely not. It is something that when we need to cross that bridge, we'll cross that bridge. Frankly, I don't even debate about it because I have absolutely nothing to do with that decision-making, so I don't waste time debating about that. I would much rather spend my time talking about NIL and how we can help young people, both as facilitators like yourselves and those that we're trying to monetize and help build brands. Let's talk about how we help you guys improve and help your lives get better. That's where I spend my time.
Antonio, Kevin, either one of y'all?
I mean, I'll jump in. I think it's not an if, it's a when. Virginia just passed a bill to be able to compensate, or not passed yet, but it went through the House and the Senate in order to be signed by the governor for schools to be able to directly compensate student athletes. Louisiana is on the same boat, right? The Virginia won't go into effect until I believe November 15th of this year. But with that said, we also have the case of Dartmouth, where they have been deemed employees of the university. We're talking about collective bargaining, Dartmouth not recognizing them, the union now appealing, and the whole thing going to Supreme, whatever, right? at the very least, I believe it will be a game of independent contractors, but it will happen. So, I mean, schools are getting ready. And I mean, just like Wally was talking about, a lot of our administrators are, I mean, some are stressing out, some are not. But in reality is you can stress out as much as you want, or you can start solving and preparing for some of these things that are going to be coming our way.
Yeah, and again, I think we're going that way. I guess my one feeling, and I know it's Pollyanna a little bit. If you want to make money, go play a sport, go pro. Tell me how fun that is. And in the day, just keep your separation. If you want to go play pro, the only reason student athletes like basketball players come to play for 1 year in the NCAA is because the NBA says they don't want them until then. So we're their training ground. The NFL says 3 years you can't go. Again, I'd like to see, if you want to make money, please go make money. There's great opportunities. But I think there's got to be some governance and guidelines. That's all.
You're suckering me in, Kevin. You're pulling me into this debate, my man.
Of course.
All right, well, we're out of time, but thanks so much. I'm assuming panelists, are you okay if they wanted to reach out to you directly to ask more questions or build some connections? Is that all right? I share your contact with them.
Of course.
All right, sounds good. So if you do have other questions, we'll connect with them, get you connected with them. But thanks so much. Let me thank our panelists for being here today.